Shelter, an incredibly diverse thing depending on the kind of horses that you have, whether you have very young stock, whether you have geriatrics, whether you have great big fat feedlot horses or thin race horses. And then of course there's all of the climatic differences to consider. So what we had to go back to is we had to go back to the basic science on this. And this is where we ended up whenever we got in real trouble. We would go back to our science committee report that told us about all of our priority welfare issues. And we would look at a recommendation based on science. One thing, if you hang around with a bunch of old horsemen, everybody's got a theory. Everybody's got a way their grandpappy did it. And it turns out that a lot of those theories don't really stand up to scientific scrutiny very well. So going back to the animal behavior scientists and the basic science was really useful whenever we got into trouble. And so the concept of shelter, you really have to look at what is thermoneutral for horse. And for horses, a thermoneutral zone, and that's essentially the temperature at which a horse feels absolutely comfortable wearing no clothing, is somewhere between 5 and 20 degrees. And in people, it's around 20 degrees. So that's your typical Hawaiian vacation where you can sit around in a bathing suit and feel perfectly fine. For our horses, it's quite a bit bigger range. So even though it may be 6 degrees out here and we might feel a little bit chilly and feel like winter is coming, that horse is actually perfectly happy. He's not actually expending any calories at all in the thermoneutral zone, either trying to stay warm or trying to stay cool. Now that is quite variable. It changes very much based on whether or not a horse is too thin, whether or not the coat is wet and it's raining, and whether or not it's windy. But it gives us a bit of a framework from where to decide that a horse actually needs shelter. And certainly in many places in BC, there's a good portion of the year where the horses are actually thermoneutral. So they really don't need very much shelter as long as the temperatures are within that thermoneutral zone. So once again, how can you write a rule for Langley that's going to apply in Kamloops and is going to apply in Saskatoon or in Ottawa? So we had to approach this problem by taking an outcome-based approach, and that is, how do we decide when an animal needs shelter? And we're going to decide that based on how the horse is doing. So the code requirement is that horses must have shelter, either constructed or natural, that protects them from the harmful effects of extreme weather conditions. So if it's normally -10 in your part of the country, and your horses huddle up around the round bale and they do fine because they've got complete access to hay, great winter coats, and they're not shivering and they're not having any difficulty with the cold, that's just fine. But when it gets to -25 and it's a blizzard and your horses are no longer feeding properly because they're so cold and they're actively shivering, you are required to take action at that point. And also, we have to address individual animals. What works for a healthy, slightly comfortably overweight quarter horse with a body condition score of 7 out of 9 is quite different from a debilitated yearling that's, for example, at the bottom of the pecking order. So those horses would fall under this protection, and that is you must promptly assist individual horses that are showing signs of heat or cold stress.